December 23, 1964. Deep in the Mekong River Delta, U.S. defenders faced certain destruction. Then an obsolete cargo plane broke every rule in the book. Its outlawed side-firing trick sent a river of tracer fire through the jungle, rewriting battlefield physics in real time. It was not just unexpected, it was banned. Why would the Air Force risk its reputation on what many called a physics glitch, and what happened that made the enemy name it the Ghost Plane? The answer begins with a night when doctrine failed and desperation sparked a revolution. Night fell heavy over the Mekong Delta, swallowing the outpost at Turney End in blackness. December 23, 1964. The defenders could hear the river, the insects, and, just beneath it all, the distant snap of gunfire. Viet Cong sappers moved in silence, slipping through the tree line, their doctrine simple: strike fast, vanish faster. Flares sputtered overhead, but the jungle swallowed light as quickly as it swallowed sound. Radio calls for help went out. The only answer was the distant whine of jets. Too fast, too high, gone in seconds. Each pass scattered a handful of rounds, then left the ground teams exposed again. The men at Turney End braced for the inevitable. Another night where doctrine offered no rescue, only the promise of being overrun. Ammunition ran low, shadows pressed in. The perimeter shrank with every burst of enemy fire. For the garrison, the difference between life and death narrowed to minutes. In that moment, the rules of air support had failed. What arrived next would break them entirely. The Douglas C-47 Skytrain first took to the air in 1941, born into a world at war. For decades, it hauled paratroopers, cargo, and wounded across continents, earning its place as a workhorse of the skies. By the early 1960s, though, the Air Force had moved on. Jet engines ruled the runways, and the old, prop-driven C-47s were dismissed as relics, outdated, slow, and officially labeled obsolete. Rows of them sat parked on forgotten airfields, their olive-drab paint faded, their engines quiet. The Pentagon's vision pointed to supersonic fighters and missiles, not lumbering transports built for a different era. Yet, in the jungles of Vietnam, the future had arrived without an answer for the kind of war being fought. The C-47, overlooked and unwanted, became available for experiments nobody else wanted to try. Its sturdy frame, slow speed, and long loiter time, once seen as weaknesses, suddenly offered a blank canvas. The right airframe, at the right time, waiting for a new purpose. Lieutenant Gilmore, Engineer Ralph Flexman, and Captain John Simons gathered in a Florida hangar, tossing out every rule the Air Force had written about how a plane should fight. Instead of speed, they wanted persistence, an aircraft that could stay over a target, not just flash by. Their idea was simple on paper but radical in practice: mount guns on the side of a cargo plane, then fly a tight circle around the enemy. The trick was the pylon turn. As the plane banked left and orbited at 120 knots, the side-firing guns would stay locked on a single spot below. The math behind it was pure physics. Centripetal acceleration, A equals V squared over R. That equation, velocity squared divided by turn radius, meant the guns could stitch a continuous line of fire into the earth, holding the target in a crosshair that never drifted. For the first time, an aircraft could rain bullets on one location without breaking off or looping back. It was a move that made the plane itself into a kind of flying sentry, orbiting danger and never letting go. No one in the Pentagon had asked for this. But the calculations proved it could work, and the slow, steady flight of the old C-47 made it possible. All they needed now was a chance to test it if they could get past the brass. Project Tailchaser began in the shadows of official disapproval. On paper, it was little more than a footnote, an experiment with a code name, a borrowed aircraft, and a handful of officers who refused to take no for an answer. The Pentagon's written doctrine left no room for cargo planes with side-firing guns. For decades, every manual insisted that firepower belonged in the nose, that attack meant speed, and that anything less was an embarrassment. Memos circled through the chain of command, stamped with language about risk, waste, and the dangers of undermining established tactics. In Florida, the work dragged on without funding or fanfare. Scrap metal was scavenged for gun mounts. Blueprints were sketched on whatever paper was at hand. When the budget ran dry, Captain Ron Terry reached for his own wallet, covering costs that official channels refused to touch. Oral histories recall receipts paid out of pocket, an officer betting his career and his savings on a physics trick the brass did not want to hear about. The team's only assets were persistence, a surplus C-47, and the certainty that the war in Vietnam was already proving the old rules useless. Every step forward meant another letter from headquarters, another warning about violating doctrine. The side-firing concept was not just ignored, it was actively blocked. The conversion of the C-47 happened in borrowed hangars, after hours, with hand tools and borrowed parts. Terry and his crew worked under the constant threat that the project could be shut down with a single phone call. Yet, as reports filtered in from the Mekong Delta, outposts overrun and jets useless at night, the urgency grew. The field needed a solution, and Tailchaser was running out of time. The next move would force the issue out of the shadows and into the hands of command. The arrival in Vietnam was not met with celebration. At Tan Son Nhut Air Base, the modified C-47 drew a line of brass and a wall of skepticism. A four-star general, face set and voice flat, declared the aircraft unfit for combat. The argument was doctrine. A cargo plane with guns on the side had no place in the official playbook. Orders were prepared to send the team and their experiment home before the wheels had even cooled. But the situation on the ground had grown too desperate to ignore. Reports of outposts falling to night attacks landed on the desk of the Vice Chief of Staff General John P. McConnell. His reply cut through the bureaucracy. He said, "We cannot deny any weapon which will enhance our capability." The override came down as a single, irreversible order. The plane would fly. The experiment was now a sanctioned weapon. The first night the gunship took to the air, the jungle below learned its new name. The low drone circled above, and a torrent of red tracers stitched through the dark, holding attackers at bay. Captured Viet Cong documents and prisoner reports began using a new term, Avion Phantasma, the ghost plane. To the enemy, it was not just a machine, but a presence. The slow propeller thrum and the endless line of fire created the sense that the sky itself had turned hostile. Outposts that had once been easy prey now glowed with the promise of survival. The myth grew with every mission. The brass had tried to bury the idea, but the field made it a legend. The ghost plane was real, and the war would never look the same again. Squadron records from 1965 tell a story that numbers alone cannot exaggerate. In a single year, a C-47 crews flew 277 combat missions across the Mekong Delta and beyond. The miniguns fired more than 137,000 rounds, each burst lighting the night and holding back attackers who had learned to fear the red tracers. Every after-action report from that period repeats the same outcome. Not a single outpost protected by a Spooky was ever lost to enemy assault. No exceptions, no asterisks. The data stood out even to skeptical commanders, an unbroken chain of survival in a war defined by uncertainty. For the first time, a weapon system delivered statistical proof that doctrine could be rewritten by results. The idea that started with a handful of rebels and an old cargo plane did not stop in the jungles of Southeast Asia. By 1967, the Air Force introduced AC-130 Spectre, a gunship built on the same principle, but bigger, heavier, and armed with cannons powerful enough to level a city block. The core lesson endured. Slow and steady circling above could outlast and outfight enemies who vanished in the dark. Even now, decades later, converted C-47 aircraft still fly as gunships in Colombia, their side-firing weapons holding the line in a different kind of war. The blueprint for overwhelming persistent firepower did not come from billion-dollar labs or polished doctrine. It came from rule breakers and tinkerers who saw what others missed and proved that sometimes the best answer is the one the experts tried to bury. The lesson endures. When official doctrine fails, innovation finds its own runway. Today, gunships built on this impossible idea still shape conflicts worldwide. In war and technology alike, Breakthroughs rarely ask permission first, they just redraw the lines. What rules are we overlooking right now?